Thanks, Caleb. I'm Stellio. I'm an alcoholic.
Stellio.
Yeah, guys, thanks for the meeting. Joe, I'm nervous. I must be honest, I already obsessed about this share already when lockdown happened, and I was thinking, sweet, I'm not going to have to share this year. And obviously, that's an indicator that my high power, like, the God that I have an understanding of today, whatever plans I have, he laughs at that, and something else will generally happen. So just to start off how, what it was like. Growing up, I was a very fearful kid. Possibly one of my earliest memories going to school, my mom dropping me off, and I would just, I'd literally cry as soon as I got in the gates. I believed my parents were never going to fetch me again. I don't know why that is. I've got a sister who's not alcoholic. I've got parents who, eventually got divorced, but it was a stable home at that time. There was no indication that I should feel that way or have that kind of mistrust, but I had this overwhelming fear already from an early age. That was compounded by the fact that, like as a kid, I had to wear braces, and I wasn't particularly athletic, so I was always the last kid picked for the team, like if it was soccer. I used to get bullied a lot, and a lot of these things were they were crushing for me, if I can put it to you that way. Possibly the first time I was given a substance was I was given medication and kind of towards the end of primary school to help me with concentration. The only thing I recall is it didn't really improve my marks. I stopped eating, and eventually I think after a short while, I was just taken off it again. But I would refer back to it later as like I think that's when my kind of journey started, because I felt different, and I liked that. Kind of going into my early teens, the first time I had a drink was at the age of 14, and right from the word go, I drank myself to smithereens. I remember the night like it was yesterday. All the fear that I'd had, kind of in my life up until that point, just disappeared in that instant. I was actually drinking with a little friend. My parents went out for the night, and we raided the liquor cabinet. And this guy had one drink, and I had half a bottle of something. I vomited all over the house, vomited in the pool. I remember my parents coming home and hearing their footsteps, down the passageway. And that was my first experience, and I guess they kind of just laughed it off as, it's going to be an experience. He'll have a hangover, and he's not going to do it again. But that definitely wasn't the case. As I kind of got towards the end of school, I started experimenting with drugs. My parents started becoming concerned, and it was the first time that I went to a treatment center, not for treatment. I looked at the people in that treatment center. I was 17 at the time, and I said, there's no ways I'm coming here, but you can give me a drug test. I failed that drug test. I then figured out a way to beat drug tests for future drug tests. I think Google had just come out that year, no jokes, and I figured out how to beat a drug test on that. Going forward, what I used to do was every time I used and my parents suspected me, I would just fix the drug test, and they would just live in suspicion, and I would carry on doing my thing. So as I obviously reached a driving age, my parents kind of got me a car, and I was permanently scratching the car, denting the car. I broke the gearbox out of my first car. There was just a constant record with me of breaking my vehicles, getting drunk every weekend, getting into relationships. Just to kind of let you know where I was with relationships was, I used to DJ at this nightclub, and there was this girl that I met there, and she was so drunk that people were clearing a circle around her, and I thought I need to speak to that one, and I did, and after a quick chat, I just thought, well, I think she should move in, and she did, and she came home with me that night, and she didn't leave for another 6 months. And how that ended was in a court case for assault, an abortion, basically made her pregnant, and when I realized that some responsibility might have to be taken here, I kind of pulled out every manipulative tool that I had within to manipulate her to get her an abortion, and the very next day, after having taken her for this procedure, kicked her out and said, "You need to go. Like, we're done." And that's kind of like what I was like in relationships. Always in some kind of relationship. I would only figure it out many years later that I always had to be in a relationship because relationships made me feel a certain way, made me feel better about myself. It kind of validated me, gave me a sense of purpose, and kind of made me feel like I was okay. And yeah, as a result, that wasn't the only time that I've forced an abortion on somebody. It happened a second time. I used to get into relationships where I would want her to understand that I was using and drinking, and chaos would ensue every single time. As I kind of got towards my late 20s, that's when the reality of treatment facilities started happening, where I had to go in for one. Sorry, I neglected to mention, I've also done a couple of geographicals where, I had this like sense of doom, from all the drinking that I was doing, all the substance abuse that was going on. And I thought, well, let me remove myself from the substance, my particular substance of choice. I'm going to move to England. At that point, I didn't realize, but I took myself with me, and the substance just continued there, just different substances. I realized in England, without having my family's backing financially, how unmanageable I was. I kind of couldn't hold down a job. Every cent that I had went towards substances and drinking. It was the first time that I was, it was the first time that I contemplated suicide in London, at a tube station. Kind of watching an oncoming train. Sometimes I don't know if you've been there, but sometimes it tells you to stand back from the platform because the train's passing through. And I stood at the edge of that platform thinking like I could end it all now, and it seemed like a reasonable thought at the time. Came back from there. When I came back from England, my family, they just wanted to help me. The other thing that happened for me in England was the first time that I went to a meeting just like this, in the sister fellowship, in fact. And I remember kind of sitting down as we just read out the preambles now, listening to the preambles and thinking, I don't have a disease, I'm not unmanageable, none of this stuff really applies. And as people went around and shared, I was extremely judgmental. What I would then acknowledge in years to come was that I just wasn't ready then. Anyway, back to coming home, my family helped me open a pub after London, which was a wonderful, wonderful way to reach rock bottom, because in a matter of 18 months, I was on my knees, crying, didn't know how I was going to live. Like, the way that I lived was I would have to take substances to live, and then I would have to take other substances to bring me down off those substances, with a whole bunch of alcohol in between that, just to kind of find some kind of happy medium, which wasn't a happy medium because it made me miserable and suicidal. Hospital trips started. Needless to say as well, by this point in my life, been to many psychiatrists, psychologists, tried various forms of therapy, tried to control drinking. I thought, no shots, just beers. I'm only going to have one, I'm not going to have two. Every single one of these attempts to control my substance and my substances and my drinking failed. And I landed up in treatment for the first time, and I think I did 3 steps, thought I was good to go. Executive package, and came out and didn't follow any suggestions. Got with a girl, never, I was still involved with the pub, so I was going there, just trying not to drink every day, and within just a matter of weeks, I'd relapsed. And the girl that I had met up with after that rehab trip, we got together, and it was a 5-year-long arduous journey of me landing up back in another treatment center. And kind of what happened in those 5 years was I actually fixed off our relationship for a long time. She fixed me. like I mentioned before, like I fixed off relationships, and I was actually able to control my drinking for some time at the beginning of that relationship. You know, when it's all light and fluffy and it's like infatuation stage and, you know, everything's cool. And when that infatuation kind of ran out, if I could put it to you that way, I needed to start doing something to change the way that I felt again, because I started not feeling okay. And how that landed me up was I would pick fights with her specifically so that I could get weekends off. Because I knew that if I could get weekends off where she would be staying with her family, then I could do whatever I wanted. And I've done many shameful things in that relationship that basically at the end of this 5-year journey together, I broke her into a million pieces. I've never forgotten the way that she cried. You know, like kind of the last night that we'd been together, and she, you know, I owned a whole bunch of stuff. I'd been cheating on her. I'd been using drugs behind her back. I was actually physically injured from my drug use. And you know, she kind of cried like a wounded animal, and she left, and I never saw her again. I then promptly, you know, got to it, because now I could just use and drink with no problem at all. And within 6 months, I was having my parents come take my car keys away. They would find me. I wouldn't answer my phone for days, and they would find me sleeping on the floor, passed out, more often than not blue in the face. And eventually, the only person that would come visit me was my mom's boyfriend. He was the only member of my family that was brave enough to walk into my house to see whether I was still alive or not. So things were pretty dire. I tried every single last thing, everything except this program, by the way. I'd kind of been introduced to the steps in my first treatment center, didn't take it seriously, didn't think it really applied to me. But what happened after that kind of 5-year stint and that 6-month period where, you know, where things got as bad as they did, I realized in retrospect that was my rock bottom. And it's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. I remember my rock bottom very clearly, like it was yesterday. And I didn't realize it at the time, but my parents were planning to have me sectioned into a treatment center. By God's grace, I became willing, and that never had to happen. I remember my mom came and sat me down and said, listen, you need to do treatment while you still have the dignity to do so. And I was just done, and I remember just crying and saying, you know what, just book the ticket. I'll go wherever you tell me. Enough is enough. And so, a little bit now about what happened. I kind of got on a plane. I almost missed the flight. I got picked up by this big, gruff, like German guy at the airport here at King Shaka, and he drove me into an increasingly rural area. And I became very nervous, you know, like I was like, shit, I'm going to wake up in a bathtub full of ice tomorrow morning or something with like my kidney gone, or didn't know what to expect. And we arrived at the gate of this treatment center, and, you know, I lived in this delusion that I was this very successful businessman. And I'd spent the last half an hour of that trip recording like the perfect voice note to like all my imaginary clients as we drove up to this gate. And anyway, I'm sure he still laughs about that today. And, you know, I kind of went in and that's where my understanding and my application of this program really started to happen for me. It was one of the best experiences of my life. You know, just briefly, how the steps, or how I understood them at the time was, you know, I had no problem understanding my step one because of all the hundreds and hundreds of examples of powerlessness and unmanageability. Step two, I had no problem admitting that I was insane. I remember one of the counselors there, you know, he used to talk about willingness. He had a spiritual group in the morning, and his group was very important because when it came to my step 2 and 3, I really had a problem with the God concept. I really, and this is the arrogance of me and the selfishness of me and the arrogance of the alcoholic is you know, like my life's in this big mess. I'm literally suicidal. mention God, and I'm like, no, I'll do anything, but I don't want to do that. So I really struggled with that stuff. But there was almost like there was a brief window in my life where I became teachable at that treatment center. I became willing to get off all my medication. I was obviously off all my substances, and how that whole kind of belief in a higher power came to be was, this counselor, I went to him and I said, this is a real big effing decision, you know what I mean? Like, how do I hand my will and my life over? How do I know I've handed my will and my life over? And he said, listen, you don't have to worry about any of that. You just have to be willing. Just have to be willing. And that word willingness kind of sprouted in me, if I can put it to you that way. And you know what? If I don't believe right now, like, that's cool. I can be willing to believe. And I am willing to do my best here and learn about these steps. And I remember being in that treatment facility, walking around to people and asking the question, like, how do you know when you've handed your will and your life over? And I kind of, for the first time, was kind of getting or falling on the fellowship, if I can put it to you that way, and learning from other people's experiences, how they had been. Because the one thing I can tell you is, in that treatment facility, I had somebody counsel me who was in recovery themselves, and I wanted what they had. They seemed stable, they seemed kind, they seemed patient. It was just something that I wanted, in the people that I saw around me. And I guess that for me was the spark in the belief that this program works. And what was going to happen for me over the coming months was I was going to have a whole bunch of experiences that would give me faith in this program. There were many times in treatment, I didn't understand what was going on. I was given suggestions that didn't make sense to me. I remember, sitting down doing my step 4, and the suggestion was you need to be as open and as honest as possible. And if you've got secrets, you can write them down. If you're not comfortable writing them down, then just mention it during the next step. And I thought, wow, there's things that I know that I'm so guilty and ashamed of. I would never be able to say that stuff. I would never be able to do it. But I followed the suggestion blindly because I knew other people had done it, and they had gotten this, what I'd learned was known as a spiritual awakening, cleaning of the slate. And I sat down with my counseling treatment, and we did this step 5. And I had like all this trepidation about, going to judge me, he's going to hate me, he's going to call the cops on me. I'm the worst addict I'm the worst alcoholic in the world. I'm the only person that's done this kind of stuff, and it wasn't the case. I still remember that step 5 very well because it was literally the start of my spiritual awakening, where I emerged from. And I know that's not everybody's experience. So if yours is different, that's okay, because it is different for everybody. But I emerged from that kind of step 5 like there'd been a massive weight off my shoulders. It was just something unlike that I'd ever thought was possible, to have a clean slate and a way forward. I also learned about my character defects and how, that fearfulness that I described as a young child. I learned the difference between rational fear and irrational fear, and how, as an alcoholic, my fear leads to me acting out on certain defects, and I was full of defects. I think I had 13: angry, resentful, arrogant, grandiose, selfish, entitled, jealous, manipulative, dishonest. Anytime I'm feeling fearful in my life, I'm bound to act out on one of those defects. When I act out on those defects for long enough, I'm going to land up drinking again because it becomes too overwhelming. My effect on other people around me becomes too overwhelming. I become an arsehole, basically, and I'm unable to live. And this was an insight into me that I became very excited about. I wrote it all down on the side of my big book, still written there today, all my defects, and still today, 5 years in, I can have any number of those defects pop up in a day and more, and it's okay because today I have awareness of that. Step 6 and 7 for me is kind of my higher power will give me an opportunity to do something different. So if I get a situation in my day where I'm angry or resentful or whatever, this program gives me the opportunity to look at why I'm resentful, maybe practice some acceptance. What's a way that I can solve this instead of living in that anger and that hatred? Because let me tell you, when I came into treatment, I hated everything and everyone. I was so hateful. And in recovery, only when you're resentful in recovery do you realize how powerful resentment is. It can literally make me feel sick to my stomach, and I'll choose to sit in that pain sometimes, and then eventually I'll pick up the phone and call my sponsor and sort it out. But it's the number one offender, like it's written in the book, and through that step 5, step 6 and 7, I'm able to kind of get over those. You know what I mean? I'm able to cope with it. I'm able to deal with it in a different way, which is, it never fails to amaze me, the power of this program. Steps 8 and 9, where we made a list of people we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all, and made direct amends where possible, has been one of the most incredible parts of my recovery. Today I have a good relationship with my family. I spoke earlier about all these faulty relationships I used to be in. So one of the toughest suggestions I got was you have to stay away from your ex, and you are not to be in a relationship for a year. And I thought, you know what I mean? It's like that one suggestion you get where it's like, oh, you take away my, my drugs and my alcohol, and now you're going to take my sex. Anyway, that was going away. That's what was going on, kind of in my head. But I followed the suggestion to a T. And I didn't realize it, but the person who noticed that the most, aside from my ongoing recovery, was my sister, who I had never had a relationship with because of the way that I was. Okay, I used to be awful to her. Round about 8 or 9 months into my recovery, she phoned up my mom and she said, "You know how I know my brother's changed?" And my mom said, "How do you know your brother's changed?" She said, "Because my brother's not in a relationship with some girl half his age, and whoever gave him that suggestion, he seems to be following it." And I didn't realize that by following that suggestion, that would be a form of amends to my sister. So this is why suggestions are so important, and why I've got to look past this when it comes to following those suggestions, because it's not important for me to understand why that suggestion is given. Not necessarily, because my disease is going to argue with it. In this particular case, by following that suggestion, aside from my own recovery and the fact that I didn't have any distractions like romance or whatever would be going on in my head, when it came to my recovery, I was able to build a relationship with my sister, through which I have a relationship with my nephew today. So I always share about him. I love that little kid so much, and it's only because of this program that that I have a relationship with him today. And this year a real highlight for me was for my birthday. I mean, he's 2.5 years old, and she recorded. He drew me this little birthday card. And he lives in the UK, so I don't get to see him. And my sister recorded him saying, "Happy birthday, Uncle Stell." And I was just like, this is incredible. You know what I mean? That I'm sober and I'm here for this, and I have a relationship with this little kid that, I found this company in the UK where I can write him a letter, then I scan it, and I give it to this company, and then they put it in a mail envelope, and then they post it to him, and it's got his little name on it, and he runs to the post box, and he's like, and he opens it up, and there's a letter from me, and I put photos of us, because we have hung out a couple of times. They came here, and I've been there once, also in my recovery, and I'll print him pictures of Spider-Man and shit like that, and it's just, I would never be doing that if I wasn't sober today, and I'm just so excited for our future together, if you know what I'm saying. My parents today, I don't know if anyone relates, but I used to fight with my dad so much. We wouldn't speak for weeks. And when we did, I would be threatening him. I would be telling him, I'd be standing up in his face and saying, "Why don't you punch me? You don't like the way that I live." Mad stuff. Today, we speak almost every single day. And it's without expectations. I'm not trying to manipulate him for money. He kind of, I think that, when I finished my 12 steps in treatment, I think it was the proudest day of my dad's life. We have a really good relationship today. And the same goes with my mom and kind of with the rest of my family. There's something I forgot to say. Something that really switched me off the concept of God was when I was still in my active addiction. This is about a year, maybe 18 months before I landed up in treatment for the last time. My aunt had a really bad car accident, and she was in a coma. And she was in hospital in Constantia, and we got the news that she wasn't going to come out of the coma. There was no connection between her brain and her body, but her body was still alive. And I guess, I was with her 3 daughters in the hospital room, and I was very angry with God, this God that I, said I didn't believe in. And every night they would pray over her bed, and I would be there, and I'd be like cringing. I'd be like, what's the point of this prayer, And I'd sit there and I'd be angry with God, and I'd think, what, God, if you're so mean, why don't you come down here and take me instead of my aunt, who never uttered your name in vain, by the way, who always said nice things to say about you, like, why would you do this to someone like her? And I was very angry with God, and it was one of those things that kind of turned me off the God concept for a very, very, very long time. Through my understanding of this program and my understanding of life today was that, life can be unfair, and I'm okay with that. Like, I've found some acceptance around that. Bad things happen. Bad things happen to good people, and it's up to me to work a program so that I can get through that stuff. In that particular instance, I couldn't. I couldn't. My aunt's death led to my biggest relapse, and my biggest relapse led to me getting into recovery. And that's a kind of a sense of perspective that I only get from this program, that I'm shaped by the experiences of my past. And every year, I'm reminded, I wasn't very nice to my aunt, when she was alive. And every year when it's her birthday, like, I rush off to her Facebook profile to put a birthday post or whatever, and every year I'm reminded that my friend request with her is still pending. Because I only clicked it, I only wanted to be her Facebook friend after this whole thing had happened. It was almost like it was too late. But through the process of amends, I've been able to make amends to her 3 daughters, who I spend time with today. If I go up to Joburg, look at the one in Joburg's moved to London now, but every time I went up to Joburg, I spent time with her. There's another 2 that live in Cape Town. Every time I go down to Cape Town, I spend time with them. This is a miracle of this program, that I'm able to make indirect amends to my aunt and direct amends to her girls, if you know what I'm saying. And as sad as that whole thing was in my life, it was sad for other people too. You know what I mean? Like, it's not all about me. Something else, about amends and kind of following the suggestion of not being in a relationship. I'm in a wonderful relationship today, from following that suggestion. It's kind of like if you had to ask me when I got into treatment, what's your plan? I'm going to be here for like 3 months. I'm going to get clean and sober, and I'm going to go stalk my ex back in Joburg because she'll want me back when I'm better, kind of thing. That's what my bright idea would have been, but obviously the suggestions were not going to be that way, and through following suggestions, I've managed to foster good relationships with people. Like I said, we're in a loving relationship today, where we live in this beautiful little forest by the seaside. I mean, it sounds like a dream come true, and it is really. Step 10 for me is the hardest step, but also the most necessary. That's kind of like, it's almost like a conglomeration of steps 4 through 9, where I've got to acknowledge my wrongs kind of as best as I can in the moment, get honest about it, practice steps 6 and 7, make amends right away where possible. I definitely do not get this right all the time, but I've got to do my best, and today I rely on the fellowship. I rely on my sponsor for whenever I'm confused. And like the remainder of the steps, step 11, I do my step 11 every single night, and I do my best to carry this message to the alcoholic who kind of still suffers. And that's my favorite part of this program, is the life that I lead today. My first year in recovery was the best year of my life. It was almost like I had a new pair of glasses on. I kind of come from Joburg, and it's very busy there, and it's the rat race, and I had a big fancy house there and all this stuff. But I've never been so busy, ironically, in a town that only has 2 traffic lights, as in Scottsboro, and I've loved every single part of it. My first, and even up to now, my first few years in recovery, we did as much service as we could. We went to between 6 and 8 meetings a week. It was just incredible. Really got stuck into the ocean, learned how to surf, became a dive master, had all these incredible experiences out there in the ocean, some of which I'm able to share with like newcomers today. Just on Friday, I had a boat full of newcomers out here on the Aliwal Shoal, and we were snorkeling with dolphins, saw a massive tiger shark. We actually saw 4 different types of shark. There were flying fish all around. I mean, it's just surreal to think that I couldn't find my way out of that dark room. And that's how my parents used to find me, almost dead on the floor. And now I'm out, like waking up early, taking newcomers out on a boat and showing them some of these incredible experiences that I've had in my recovery, to the extent that some of them now, I just heard recently, have gone on and done their own diving courses because of the love that they've kind of found in the ocean. Something which, incidentally, my sponsor and my sponsor's sponsor found in the ocean. It's just been so beautiful, to kind of get plugged into like this different life that I never thought existed. Other things that have kind of happened, in terms of gifts of recovery is like I'm employed today. And like I'm employed and I don't feel like a fraud in the morning. I always used to wake up in the morning and eventually how it was my dad was the only person who would employ me, obviously. And I liked that because he couldn't really fire me. But I'd wake up in the morning and I'd know I'm a fraud. And you don't really deserve the salary that you're getting, and you don't treat people nicely. And I was always the last to arrive at the office, first to leave. Today it's different. Like I'm the first one to arrive at the office, and one of the last to leave. I have a lot of responsibility today. The responsibility that I have today is all started with kind of following suggestion again in the beginning of my recovery. I had to go get a simple job, so I worked at this guest house for some time, and then I worked at a dive center for some time. And once I'd been clean and sober for a year, I was able to go start volunteering at the treatment center where I got better, and I actually lived on site for a while, and it's been also one of the most incredible experiences of my life because I've been surrounded by newcomers constantly, and as annoying as they can be, like I love them, you know what I mean? Because I was also a newcomer. That reminds me of where I was, seeing the madness, seeing alcohol, seeing this disease in action every day it's a marvel. It's a complete marvel. But then also being around for people to get better, because I've sat there before and chaired a sponsee's 1 year. You know what I mean? And it's kind of in those moments where it all makes sense. And my life has self-worth today, and I have responsibility today, and I'm a trusted member of a team today. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and I pinch myself. And I drive up to that treatment center and I look at the gate, and every single morning, without doubt, I got butterflies in my stomach, and not those shitty butterflies you get on the way to the dealer. Those butterflies that are like, life is amazing today. How I used to live on 3 or 4 different types of drugs and a ton of meds and a bottle every day. I mean, it couldn't be more different. And I'm incredibly grateful, for that. Just quickly, recovery as well has not been without its tragedies. We lost a family member. Well, he wasn't he was like he was more like a family friend, but he got shot in a farm murder a couple of years ago. And for the first time I was there, instead of how, I spoke about how my aunt passed away and I made that all about me and I was relapsing and going mad. This time when this happened, I was able to be there for my family. In my first year of recovery, there was a woman of a friend of mine who was in treatment. I was in treatment with him. She came into treatment after we got out of treatment, and program wasn't for her. She ran away. She overdosed in a bathroom in North Beach in Durban. and I was with that friend on a Monday night, and he got a phone call to say it was his wife, this woman. Your wife's been found overdosed in a bathroom, and she didn't make it. And she's at Addington Hospital, and you need to come and identify the body, please. And that was my first experience with death because of this disease. And I kind of switched into helping mode, and I took my friend to the hospital, and we went and we looked for her. We looked for her for 2 hours in Addington Hospital, where literally a street behind is full of dealers. I mean, there were dealers and people drinking right in front of the hospital. It was a dangerous situation for non-recovering alcoholics to kind of be in. But we went in and we were in recovery, and we looked out for each other, and we went and we kind of found her. And I'll never forget, the image of her, because it was the first time that I'd seen that she was at peace. And I also connected with the reality of this disease. They used to sit in the treatment center and tell us, stay sober for long enough and you'll see how this disease kills, how people kill themselves. People stop doing what they're meant to be doing, and they kind of fall off the wagon. And that was my first exposure to that, and it was heartbreaking. I was there when that woman's son was told, your mom's not coming back. She's gone to heaven and she's not coming back. Those experiences, sad as they were, carry a message to me in a way, because I know that if I do this, I don't have to do that to my loved ones. I don't have to live in that fear. I can feel to the best of my ability, okay. Other things that have happened was, I've seen people in this program that have been around for a long time that have relapsed, which has been incredibly hard to witness, but also reminds me of the realities of this. Likewise, people who've stayed in recovery and died of disease and old age, the counselor that I met, that I spoke of earlier, who told me about willingness. He passed away sometime last year, and his dedication to this program inspired me to no end, because as sick as he was, he had a lot of luck. He had throat cancer, and he was very sick. He never missed his morning group up at that treatment center. He spoke when he had no saliva left in his voice, nothing. He would drink water just so that he could talk properly, and he never missed his group until the day he couldn't make it. And when he passed away, it was sad. It was incredibly sad. But I didn't drink. I didn't make it about me. And I'm kind of I've got a responsibility now to try and carry the message of the stuff that he taught me about willingness and other things. And that's just kind of how this program works. I guess, one thing I want to end on is that this program's given me a perspective of life that I didn't know was possible. I didn't know that I would even have been alive this long. I guess I spent a lot of my life just thinking, you're probably not going to make 30, and that's okay. And today, being hungry for life, people often say, Stellio, hey, you're busy. You're a busy guy. And I love that. This program's given me a thirst for life that I just can't deny. I love my life today. This year's been mad. Let me just tell you, lots of fear this year. Which I think maybe a lot of people can relate to. When the whole lockdown happened, I literally had my meetings taken away. I didn't really like the Zoom meetings. My meeting attendance dropped. I was in a mess constantly. I literally believed I was going to die any minute. I believed my family were going to die any minute. I actually manipulated papers from work so I could go up to Joburg to visit my family for the last time, because we were essential workers, so we could get this, this paperwork. And anyway, went up there, visited them. It was very eerie traveling throughout a lockdown and all this stuff. It was all mad. And in retrospect, everything's turned out to be okay. But I've never been in a situation where I've been in more fear this year. And I was literally reduced to a point where still getting on my knees every morning, reminding myself I've got a roof over my head, I'm in a loving relationship today, I've got friends all around me, I've got a meal in front of me, and life is okay. And that's something only this program can do. And as kind of the world is reawakening now, and these lockdowns are being lifted, and things are starting to normalize a little bit. I'm just grateful to kind of be here. I'm so grateful for the experiences I've had, and thanks for letting me share.
Thanks.